Hey gang, I'm Cole Cheney and this is episode 50 of the CBD Source podcast. Happy 5-0 Friday. You're listening to the CBD Source podcast, your source for all things CBD. So excited to hit that 50th episode milestone, gang. Thanks to all of you for listening, interacting, and supporting the podcast. April 20th, 2020 will be our 1 year anniversary from our launch. And April 20th, 2020 is 420 all month long. Coming up on the show, I got to finally meet up with a former fellow New York City creative director whose life changed drastically after a tragic accident on a girl's trip to Florida that sent her on a CBD journey she'd never imagined. But first, if you haven't heard the news, we're going live with audio and video every Wednesday while we're in quarantine on both Facebook and Instagram in our big hour-long Hemp Day giveaway. We're filming it in 4K for YouTube as well, gang. If you want to be sure to win prizes, call the show's toll-free hotline, 1-833-CBD-GANG. That's 1-833-223-4264. It's a toll-free number. You can call it 24/7. Nobody's actually going to pick up. It's just a voicemail. You leave the message, it gets emailed to me as a sound file, and we can play it right on the show. If we do play your call in the air, you'll win a CBD Source pin prize pack as well as a nug of Catskill Hemp Co. CBG. In this past week's live show, we answered some listener questions. We played the video of Tommy Chung telling his Weedman van story for the first time. We saw a video of Chef Ryan Weber's Canna Milk that we heard audio of in last week's episode. We did a CBD Source unboxing live on the show from 3 different brands. We had a big 420 vape sesh and gave away a bunch of CBD prizes, including CBD gummies by Verified CBD, a signed copy of the book 7 Ways to Manage Pain with CBD by its author David Anthony Schroeder, and an Ignite CBD tincture. Tune in this Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. New York time to win more sweet CBD prizes from our big smell-proof stash box. Without further ado, let's cannabis right into it, gang. Our big interview today is with founder of CBD brand Indigo and Haze. She's also the editor-in-chief of Women and Weed magazine and the author of Women and Weed, the book that just came out this past week and is available on Amazon and wherever you get your books. And we'll be giving away a signed copy of her book Wednesday on our live show. Gang, give a big CBD Source podcast welcome to Elana Frankel.
Gang, you're listening to the CBD Source podcast.
Hey, Elana, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. Sorry we couldn't do this in the office like I wish we could have, but
I know.
I'm trapped at home now, so this is a little...
We all are. I totally appreciate you doing this, and thank God it's not visual. It's just like, I feel like I'm in a mugshot, me and this like white wall. Although I do have my... Can you read that?
Keep dogs off grass, and they're smoking weed. Cool. So how's everything going? It's been so long since I saw you at your...
I know. It's been so crazy. I mean, honestly, I don't even know where to begin. The world is such a wacky place. It was wacky to start with CBD and cannabis, and now it's even wackier.
Yeah.
How about you? Rick, how's it going? How's the podcast
going?
going?
Oh, the podcast is going great. It's just been growing bigger and bigger, bigger guests, and finally got you on. I know. Thank you for your patience. But big things have happened for you since I first met you. So you want to give us some backstory? I really do want to get back into your history because the story that you told at that, I saw you at a CBD seminar type of thing, like a lecture that you were giving in Port Jervis. And you were talking about your whole backstory and how you got into CBD and how you even found out about it, and like a personal story that what happened to you when you were like on vacation. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. A lot of people haven't heard that, and I want people to be able to hear that on our platform here.
Yeah, sure. So I have always been a responsible recreational user. THC, I understood. But it wasn't until I was on a girls' weekend in Miami that I started this whole journey. So I was sitting at the dinner table at a restaurant with two girlfriends. I ordered some appetizers, stood up and said, hey, I'm not feeling too well. I'm going to go use the ladies' room. And I never made it. I opened up my eyes and I was having a CAT scan in the hospital.
Jeez.
And it was crazy. So nobody really understood what happened, but I either had a seizure, fell, fractured my skull, or fell, fractured my skull, and had a seizure. Either way, I fractured my skull, the back of my skull. I hit my head so hard, it thrusted forward, and I bruised the whole front part of my brain. Woke up with two black eyes. So two black eyes, front of my brain was bruised. Back of my skull was fractured, about a 4-inch fracture. And when I woke up, I was presenting as a stroke victim. I couldn't speak. I was grabbing, I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't focus. Any kind of light or noise stimuli would just send me off. Like I just couldn't handle anything. And I was given anti-seizure medication. I was in the hospital in Miami for a week. I finally negotiated to get back to New York. And while I was still presenting as a stroke victim, I went to go see a whole bunch of neurologists, and they all pretty much said the same thing. You have a traumatic brain injury. You need bed rest. You need to lay down in bed, perhaps up to a year.
Whoa.
Maybe even longer. Yeah.
What were you doing for work at this time when you took this little vacation?
I was a creative director. I was creative director for an online retail company. And I had at that time, almost 40 people reporting to me. I had a big team. I had a big job. We were creating content 2, 3, 4 times a day for all different mediums. And it was insane. And so I was told that I had to stay on bed rest until the inflammation went down, and then they could sort of see what the damage was. But right at that moment, my brain was so inflamed. I had so much inflammation, they just couldn't do anything for me. And so on day 2 or 3 of bed rest, my husband came to me and he said, we can't live like this. You know, I'd basically been laying down in bed in a dark room. I had, at the time, they were small children, 2 small children, a job. I was the breadwinner. And it was not working. It was obviously not working.
Yeah.
So he said, we're going to have to find an alternative. And even though I understood him, I couldn't communicate. But at that point, he understood my mumbles.
Right.
That's the beauty of 18 years of marriage.
You didn't have speech back yet? What were your?
No, I didn't have speech. I eventually could write. I could scribble. My handwriting wasn't very good, but I could eventually communicate with him via handwriting. Mm-hmm. Eventually, as the rest and the healing started, I was able to speak, but it was still challenging to communicate, for sure. So he went off to do some research, and I just still laid there. I've always been open to alternative medicines, plant medicine. I'm also a yoga teacher. I have an acupuncturist that I've worked with for years, Reiki. So I wasn't closed to the idea. It's just when he came back to me and said, listen, I think I found something, but you're going to have to really be open-minded. It never occurred to me that I would have to be super open-minded, because he said to me, I think we should try cannabis. And when he said that to me, it was, my immediate reaction is, I'm not getting stoned. Like that, I just was like that I could communicate. That he understood. And he said, it's not THC. He said, I don't even think we need to go with marijuana. I think we can go with hemp. I still had no idea what he was talking about. And then he mentioned CBD, and he found an incredible amount of research online. And you have to remember, this was almost 6 years ago. We're on the East Coast, right. Prohibition state. So the concept of CBD was still very foreign and not understood. And I had never even really understood it or heard of it in this setting. Yeah. So he said to me, we should try some CBD as a therapeutic healing methodology. I had to pause. I definitely had to pause.
Yeah, like
But
what even is that? What like
exactly.
yeah.
And then once you decide, okay, I'll try it. Like I'll try anything. I'm so desperate. It's great to say, okay, I'll try it. And then all of a sudden you're like, now what? Where do I get it?
Mm-hmm.
It's great. So that was the next step. Once I sort of felt open and safe enough to say yes, then it was like, okay, now what? You start making phone calls and you start communicating to your network and you start talking to people and start saying, hey, here's who I am. Here's what's happening to me. This is what I want to try. Do you know anyone or anything that can help?
Yeah. Back then, nobody had access. Nobody even knew what CBD really even was, except for like a small few in California. Like, I think if you would have asked me back then what CBD is, I would have no clue. But if you said hemp, I would have been like the hippie clothes that, like,
exactly.
Like that's like, it's not going to get you high. Yeah. Yeah. Like burlap kind of material.
Totally. Exactly.
Yeah.
And, and so we were very lucky. We connected, with an incredible group of people who have been working with the plant for a really long time, who I've known, family members, and who were really open to not only providing really safe quality product, but also spending the time to educate us about the plant and the potential that it had, and that it has. For somebody like me at the time.
Yeah, that's fortunate that you had relatives or someone that was that connected to you that knew how to,
exactly.
the advantages of it.
That saved us.
Wow.
And that's what really sort of led me down the path towards education. Once we did get product in hand, there was lots of different product. We got tinctures, we got topicals, we had flour, we had a whole bunch of things. And not only then did we not know what to do with it, but we had no idea about dosing. And so I did what came naturally to me. I started low and slow.
Mm-hmm.
I tried a little bit of something, waited, see how I felt, assess the situation, and I found my perfect optimal dosage, and I changed with evening versus morning. I changed with what I ate, if I didn't eat, if it felt good to have tea, if it didn't. And so I sort of tried all these different things until finally I found a protocol that started to provide relief and help me.
That's
better.
Amazing, because you really were like a guinea pig of titrating up on yourself because
Exactly.
you had no clue.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
no doctors can give you advice when they have no idea what the hell you're even trying,
Exactly. And when I would see the doctors, they would, because it was obvious that I was getting better, and I was finding relief pretty quickly. And they kept saying, like, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. And so I did. I was able to really find a personal protocol, something that really worked for me. And it was definitely scary, and it was definitely a different approach to medicine and healing that I was used to. But once I realized, and once it started to click, and I physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually started to come back to the world,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this.
It really is more like Eastern medicine than Western medicine, right? Or whatever
Definitely.
The ancient medicine, herbal medicine.
And I think that's probably part of me too. This plant is so much a part of, ancestral ancient DNA that it lives, that the knowledge is in you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just letting it out and sort of pushing aside all of the assumptions that you have about plant medicine.
Yeah, it really is. So you started taking CBD in all these different forms, and what did you find was your optimal for all the stuff that was happening in your were you keeping like a diary or some kind of journal to keep track of what you were taking?
I kept a journal. I definitely wrote down everything. At first, tea was really important to me. I'm a tea drinker, and so that was an easy way for me to connect with the plant and feel comfortable. And so I really liked that ritual of tea making, of understanding the process of making it, and then
maybe you can explain that to us, because I don't think I've ever made tea out of hemp. So maybe you can explain what you did as far as like, did you grind it up first, put it in like a tea kind of container, or like to steep?
I got it in pre-bagged.
Oh,
so I was
nice.
able to, so I was able to have it pre-bagged. But what I ended up doing, and I played around with how long I would steep it for, and the potency around it. But what I started to do is add other flavors and other sort of herbs and other sort of teas, basically. Like at one point I added a little bit, when I needed a little bit of energy or I needed a little bit more focus, I would add a little bit of green tea to the hemp. So it would be a combination. I opened up a lot of tea bags and I spent a lot of time and there was a difference between iced tea and hot tea for me, which was also very interesting because I had never really experienced a difference in hot tea versus cold tea. I didn't have a head injury. But there was a definite difference in how it affected my body. So that was kind of interesting too.
It's curious to me. So was the tea coming decarbed already, or was the hot water somehow decarbing it? Or were you or were you having like straight CBD instead of CBD because it was still in its acid form, not decarbed?
No, I think that's a really good question. At the beginning, I was just pulling open tea bags. I have no idea what I was like. First to tell you, I had no idea what I was doing. My guess is it had already come, I don't know. You know what? It's a really good question. My guess is that the hot water had something to do with
decarbing
the experience. And I don't know. I'll have to go back and look. It was a long time ago. I'll have to go back and look at that.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Because I wonder if you would decarb your hemp first and then you would put it into a tea bag or some, like they make just like containers that you put loose tea into and then you can seep from that, right? So like maybe if you put decarbed already, put it in there and now you're getting like straight CBD and whatever other cannabinoids are in there, CBG, CBN, CBC, whatever, like you're seeping all of that in decarbed. So it's not the acid form. Like I wonder, because the acid form is great too for a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that it was not the acid form.
Okay. Right.
But I also do think that the hot water had something to do with it because, like I said, there was a definite difference that I felt between a hot cup of tea and a cold brew, for sure.
Right.
There was a definite sort of different type of relief.
So you're going mostly hot tea when you're first testing this out and seeing better results.
That's what I was used to, and that's what I understood sort of visually. And was the thing that I sort of could connect to. And honestly, at that point, I was unable to do a lot of small motions. And so the process of making tea was actually a really good sort of rehab as well.
Right.
Like I said, the ritual of going through the process really helped me with my fine motor skills, to be quite honest.
Oh, it makes total sense because you had those mechanisms in place. Like you knew what you were doing with your hands making the tea because it's so rote at that point because you've done it a million times. And having to relearn, tea leaves and hemp leaves are just leaves when it comes down to it. You're doing the same process pretty much. That's cool. That's a neat so the incorporating hemp into your tea process was helping you get that motor skill back. That's neat. Cool.
Yeah, actually, the first time I've said that out loud.
It makes sense, though. It makes total sense.
So I was in this process of understanding how the plant, and specifically at this time, hemp-derived CBD, could help. And I was going through the process. I was getting a lot better. I was feeling a lot better. And I started going back to work a couple days a week. Yeah, it was kind of crazy.
How long did it take? 3 months? And then you were back?
Yeah. Wow. And then I was back. Everybody thought I was going to be on disability. Everybody thought I was going to have to quit. But I started coming back a couple of days a week. I definitely needed help. There were days when, the subway was a nightmare. And I had incredible train buddies who would help me get to my destination every day because it was a pretty long commute. But as I started to feel better, and as I started to be able to be a part of the world a little bit more, back into myself, I started to really think about the universe basically hit me over the head, literally, and said, hey, you might be on the wrong path in this world. You want to rethink what you're doing. And so when my company was bought by a larger company, and I started going to these meetings, helping the team and the company transition to this other new world. I started sitting in these big sort of corporate meetings with lots of dudes in like khakis and Oxford shirts. And they all kept mispronouncing my name. And they all kept saying like, what do you do again? What are you? Creative director? What does that mean? And I finally said, listen, you guys, this is not for me. Like, I didn't get into this business to sort of work in, a gray cubicle. So I'm gonna bow out. I'm gonna help my team transition to this new company. Like I said, I had about 40 people, so I was really focused on getting them settled. And once they did, I stepped back and I said to my husband, "Listen, there's something here. Like, this is real. I want to quit and start a CBD business."
Nice.
Yeah. My husband said, I totally hear you and I believe, and that's great, but it's illegal. I was like, yeah, I totally hear you on that. But I think we can figure out a way to make this work where I, don't go to jail. And
we're talking like 5 years ago. This was happening 5 years, 6 months, or eight or 9 months. Like, that's a long time ago to get in on this.
Yeah. So I sort of quickly I defaulted to what I'd already been doing my whole life, and that's creating content. And so I quickly went to the place where I thought I could be the most useful in this industry, and that is education. And I really wanted to make sure that before anything, I was fully educated. And so I spent a lot of time talking with lots of doctors, talking with lots of scientists, talking with lots of cultivators, people who've been doing this a long time, and educating myself. And it was really important that I got that formal education, like I said, with scientists and researchers and doctors, but also with people on the ground, people who are touching the plant, people who are growing, people who have had incredible experience making this all happen. And I was very lucky. Like I said, I have family members. So I was really lucky in that I could access all of those different types of people and get myself educated.
That's great.
Because yeah,
I would have been like, I hope I'm recording all of this audio while I'm interviewing them. So I sort of started on this journey. I first was able to work with some of the manufacturers and the makers who had sent me product to test while I was trying my own healing process. And so I was able to connect with the tea maker. I was able to connect with some topicals. I was able to connect with a vape pen manufacturer. And so I sort of took a whole bunch of different types of product. And I ended up starting off as basically the Tupperware lady of CBD. I would go to women's houses. They would invite 10 of their friends, and we'd do a little show and tell. It was really interesting because everybody thought I was nuts. Nobody knew what CBD was. Nobody... people were like, are you a drug dealer? Are you like, I cannot explain to you the sort of quizzical looks I got or the sort of insane. I mean, people were doing this as a favor. These were friends of friends. But at some point, I know that they were all looking at me like, what is she talking about? Yeah, crazy weed lady coming over to try to sell us weed.
Exactly. And then a lot of people, as you said, when I say the word hemp, they just immediately went to a sort of 70s macrame world.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so what I found was that as soon as I spent some time educating these smaller groups of people about CBD, the more interested they were and the less sort of skeptical. And it was fascinating in that it became sort of mini focus groups for me.
That's awesome.
And I was able to collect so much data, mostly about women, and mostly I would target, I would sort of ask a woman in her 40s, let's say, to host a party. And inevitably, she would have a 20-something daughter who would attend and a 75-year-old mother who would attend. So I was able to talk to women in all of these ages and stages about what their health and wellness needs were. Not even before having a conversation about cannabis. It was more of, this is a health and wellness conversation. What are you talking about? What are you listening to? What's your body saying at this point? And inevitably, the three things that came up for these three groups of women were anxiety, insomnia, sleep issues, and chronic pain. Inevitably, those were the three things that I heard over and over and over again. Women in their 20s, anxiety, definitely women in their 40s as well, but women in their 40s more about sleep issues, and then women in their 60s, 70s, and even into their 80s, chronic pain.
Wow, these seminars were invaluable. What a great way to have a little focus group without paying for it. You're actually like getting paid to get information. That's perfect.
Exactly. And they were like,
and the whole goal is helping people, that's the amazing thing about it. The
whole goal is healing. Yeah. And that's it. It's health and wellness. And so inevitably, as these sort of parties went on, I was able to start to sell product, particularly topicals and the teas. I would give out samples of the tea. I would make a great, pot of tea, and we'd have these conversations over tea and biscuits. And it was wonderful, and it was lovely, and everybody sort of started to understand it.
CBD infused tea parties.
Yeah, it was great. There was one, it was so good. There was one where I brought out this sort of large chopping block, and I had all these different herbs on it. I had like a rosemary, a mint, and you could infuse your own sort of accents into the tea. So you'd get your hemp tea, and then if you wanted to add a little rosemary or a little mint to it or a little lemongrass, and you could sort of pick and choose and taste, and everyone loved it.
What's awesome about that is like each one of those has its own terpenes. Exactly. So like you're really creating a concoction. Yeah. You're creating some kind of like entourage effect, personalized based on your own, choices. So that's pretty cool.
But I sort of did it without the, hardcore scientific explanation of terpenes to these women. Because at that point, they don't care what terpenes are. But what they do know is that the combination of a rosemary and a citrus, or a mint and a citrus with hemp, really makes them feel good, and they love the taste, and they love the smell. Right. And so to them, that was it. And then later, when they're like, hey, what is that all about? Then if they want to talk about terpenes, if they want to understand a little bit more, you go deeper. But really, it's that sort of, that feeling that grabs people.
Yeah, it's a lot of chemistry is just kind of behind the scenes. You know what I mean? Like, the chemistry's happening. You eat a Milky Way, you don't know why you like it so much. There's a million weird chemicals that went into making that taste and that experience. It's just like, ignore what's on the side of the package and enjoy the taste. Like that same works with plant medicine, because it's like you can not understand the chemistry behind it, but you're still going to get the benefits because the chemistry is there and it's doing stuff with your endocannabinoid system. So that's cool. And
it feels good.
It does feel good, and it is a personal preference what terpenes you would like to incorporate. If you're not taking it specifically for medicine, just kind of for the taste and the flavors, you're still getting benefits from it, though. So that's what's cool about that. Neat.
Yeah, and I also heard a lot about, smell as well, that when somebody would inhale that sort of citrus smell, it would bring them back. It became a therapy session really, because they would start from childhood memory of,
Yeah.
whatever it was. And so that sort of was also fun to experience.
Never discount the time traveling properties of terpenes. Like just smelling a certain terpene can take you right back to childhood. It's insane. Or the last time you smelled it really heavily, like they kind of.
I love that time traveling terpenes.
Yeah.
Love it.
It really is a thing. Like every time because we get so many different CBDs to sample here at the podcast from our unboxing segments, and just the first whiff of a terp, and it's just like, oh my God, that's taking me back to a childhood memory, like an individual one, like you can picture yourself at a flea market when you smelled that on, that scent in like a floral mix or something. It's like, whoa, I just went through time and experienced that again for the first time.
I love that. I love that. So there I was, traveling around with my little box of toys and having a good time. And, but it's still, there was still something missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really lucky enough to be introduced to someone who was a publisher, magazine publisher. He did SIPs, such special interest publications. They were sort of one-off.
Mm-hmm.
They were longer formatted magazines that almost were like journal magazines. They're a combination of a journal and a magazine. And there was no advertising. They would sit on newsstands for 3 to 6 months. They were slightly higher in price because there was no advertising. And so I was introduced to him, sat down and said, listen, I want to create a magazine called Women and Weed. And never in a million years thinking not only would he say yes, but that he would do it. Because one thing to say yes, there's another thing to actually do it.
Yeah.
But he said, okay, I want to know more. I said, listen, here's what I've been doing. Right now, there is very little to no opportunity for women to feel comfortable understanding or getting the information that they need to understand cannabis. Right now, it's either walking into a dispensary in a legal state that it doesn't really cater to women, to their needs, health and wellness needs or recreational needs. And there isn't really a written place, a place where the words exist that speak to women.
Right.
All cannabis magazines at the time sit in the men's section of the newsstand.
Huh.
Which
like High Times and stuff.
Yeah, they all just sat. They're all men's interest magazines.
Right.
And it's fine. Not, it's fine. And then maybe once in a while they'd have a women's section, but I really wanted to focus because I understood not only that women's needs were very different than men, but that they were very challenged by educating themselves and figuring out how to educate themselves. And also, at the end of the day, too, speaking with a lot of scientists and researchers, cannabis affects women very differently than men. We all have the same body parts. Our heart, lungs, intestines are all in the same place. But cannabis is going to affect me differently than it's going to affect you because of my hormones, because my age, because of my stage, whatever it is. And not many people understand that.
Maybe you can get into that a little bit because this is something that you did bring up in your lecture about how I'm remembering this, even though it was like episode 1 or 2 when you had that lecture. When you were talking about how, like different parts of women's menstrual cycle, they might need more or less CBD, or like women in menopause would have a different, cannabis would affect them differently and all that stuff. Maybe you can go into that a little bit more detail because it seems like you've done research on that specifically.
Yeah. So there's been some research out of Washington State University, and it's really right now with mice. But there is definite understanding amongst scientists and researchers that cannabis affects women's bodies differently than men's. Intuitively, I sort of knew that.
Mm-hmm.
If I smoked a joint that my husband smoked, it's going to affect us very differently. I learned that pretty quickly. I love him to death, but like not to always take his advice. But it was really it's also really challenging if you're walking into a medical dispensary and you're hoping to get something for X, Y, and Z, and it is a specific female experience. You might not get the same answer. You might not get the right answer because all the research has been done on the quote unquote normal body, which is the male body. So research, that's the other thing that I think is really interesting, is that research throughout the years has been on the male body because researchers and scientists, the medical profession, didn't want to deal with the hormonal swings of women. They thought it would mess up their numbers. So,
but that's the answers we want to find out. When they're having hormonal swings, can CBD affect you differently? Is anyone doing research on this right now? Like, I'm sure this is the kind of stuff that you're researching for your book and magazine. Like, are people doing specifically women's studies about CBD and other cannabinoids?
Yeah, but not enough. So we're not quite there yet, especially human trials. It's not quite there yet.
Right.
But we'll get there. But like you said before, there's issues of menstruation. There's issues of menopause. There are definite cancers that are specific to women. Ovarian. So I think that the need is out there, and there are doctors and there are healers and medical professionals who intuitively understand this. And then I think that the science and the research will inevitably catch up for sure. But even on those are bigger issues. But even on a daily basis, even the age that I'm at versus the age of a 20-year-old woman, the tolerance levels are going to be different. There's environmental factors that are going to be different. There are all of these things that make the plant a personal and customized experience that you need to be aware of as a woman when you're ingesting, smoking, putting it on your body.
That it might affect you differently than your male counterpart who is introducing it to you? Is that what you mean? Or
yes, or the 20-year-old woman who's sitting to my left or the 8-year-old woman who's sitting to my right.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's different experiences within, the women as well as the women versus the men. Yeah,
if you're a 75-year-old woman and your 22-year-old granddaughter wants to introduce you to the world of dabbing, you might want to take it a little slow, Grandma. It might be a little shock to the system. It's not the 2% joint you had in the 70s.
No, it's true. And even the simple thing is ratios, like if it's a 10-1 or, whatever it is, you really have to be mindful of these things. And particularly if it's an edible,
Yeah.
Please go in slow. I'm begging all of you.
Yeah. Titrate up your edibles. Start with a crumb.
Exactly. And then wait 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
Don't wait 10 minutes and say, there's nothing happening.
I always said if I do edibles, I set my Alexa for an hour 20 and like set a timer. Like Alexa set an hour 20. I'm high as, I can't say fuck because if I say that, Alexa just beeps it. So I kind of have to come up with like code words. Alexa, set a Stony Stone timer for 1 hour and 20 minutes. And then like when it hits that 120, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember setting that alarm. I'm good.
Nice.
Thanks, Alexa, for the reminder.
Your Stony Stone timer is done.
Alexa is like never ending. The beauty of Alexa just keeps on giving.
She's my stoner companion. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you when you were talking about women and weed, before we even get into the magazine and the book, which now is on shelves, I imagine, because I have a copy right here of Women and Weed.
Oh, it's you.
I got it at your lecture. When you're saying like when you pitched that to the guy who was the publisher or whatever, you must have come up with it like in a creative brainstorm somewhere along the line around just sitting around thinking like, I want to get into this world. What angle can I take? And like, what got you thinking women and weed? Like, what was the trigger? Like, what steps do you think your brain went through? And then you're like, I got to register this as a domain. This is real. I got to make this real. Because that happens to me all the time.
Yeah, I know. I think it was all of these parties that I was throwing. I think it was all of these events. I mean, I was getting all of the data and I was getting all of the information, and the stories were all there. Women were telling me these stories, and it seemed like a natural segue into the sort of written word, the you know what I mean, the magazine. So I'm not sure if I sort of woke up one day and was like, oh, light bulb went off. I think it was just a natural evolution to that moment.
That makes sense.
Where it was like, oh, all of these women have stories to tell and questions. Where is a place that they could all come together? That now, I think the real question though is why the written word in a magazine versus an online. Yeah. Because the digital world versus the print world.
Right. Or an audio or video world over text too.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And part of it was because I grew up as a magazine editor my whole life. I've been in that print world for a while, so it was easy for me. But I also think that part of me really wanted to find an outlet that would grab people's attention that needed it. So at that point, CBD, all the other compounds from the plant, there was a lot of, and there still is a lot of conversation within the industry. So people talk to each other in the industry really well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of online forums. There's a lot of places to go, people to talk to and chat who are really knowledgeable and amazing. But I wanted to expand that information to the next sort of concentric circles, which were the people who wanted and needed the information but didn't know where to get it. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily were going to sort of go online to sites that they probably didn't even know existed. Lots of people outside of the world of Leafly or Leafwire, all of the places that have information, Civilized, they're all there and they're amazing, but it's not necessarily that well known outside of the industry. And so for me, partnering with somebody who created a magazine that is on newsstands in very mainstream places like
Barnes and Noble,
Whole Foods, Publix. These are places that are really going to get the eyeballs that I wanted. Mm-hmm. Also, quite frankly, to pay for a magazine is an incredible privilege to have that $13.99 to pay for that information. And I'm very grateful to those who have spent the money because it isn't inexpensive. But they then pass it on to friends who pass it on to friends who share the information. And there's a gravitas about it that is a little better than just going online and hoping that the website that you've hit is going to be good information.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Are you going to do more issues of the magazine too, or we're just focusing on the book right now?
Nope. We've got another issue coming out. The world is a little bit funky at the moment, so I'm not 100% sure what the drop date's going to be, but we're in the midst of it. We're in the middle of it for sure. And obviously the book came out yesterday, so
congratulations.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
So, really is. I know. Nice quarantine book club is what I'm
Hey, yeah, why not? Can you order it on Amazon? People can just order it.
You can. Please order it on Amazon. Start your own quarantine book club. But the book has been pre-sold really nicely. It's going to be in bookstores as well. And it's really a combination of the first couple of issues of the magazine and then some extra content. So it's really a great combination of all the good information that we've been publishing for the last 2 years.
That's cool. I'm an information junkie, so anytime new, like you're saying, where like magazines will just drop about CBD, there's so many kind of things like that where I'll just be in the supermarket and be like, another one, another $15. I have to buy it. I have like a collection now of all these, like anytime, especially because it's cool to me because I live in New York. You live in New York as well, but like when you see CBD stuff on a newsstand, it's like, we're becoming more like less scary. Every time I see it, it's like one step towards more acceptance, public acceptance, in a non-legal state. So I always pick him up just to see what people are writing about. And, it's a lot of the same stuff, but also a lot of good new information too. And I love personal stories myself. I love hearing stories about people's personal experiences and how CBD helped change their life and stuff. So, you toss personal stories in with some good science and like new actual scientific studies. You can keep producing magazines forever because I will keep reading them. You know what I mean? Like I want to learn what new is happening.
And that was part of the pitch for Women in Weed. That for me, I understood from my own personal story, my narrative taught people. And so the easiest and best connections that I was making in the industry and what I was making with potential customers was by telling my story. So yes, in the book and in the magazine, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of truth, and it's fact-based, but there's also tons of personal narratives, and there's tons of women telling their stories, and everything from their own healing experience, but also about them working in the industry. Because that was the other thing, the industry, and rightfully closed, having been illegal for so long, is a closed industry. The idea of, being a cannabis farmer, hemp farmer, the idea of distilling, cultivating, extracting, all of those things were, I think, a lot sort of scarier and closed and mysterious.
Especially a family farmer who's been in it for 100 years. Like you're almost 10 years ago, it would have been a huge black stain on your reputation to deal in the cannabis world at all. Yes. It makes all your other vegetables tainted in a way because it's like, oh, they're growing drugs there too.
Yeah, and now women telling their stories in the magazine, whether they're farmers. We've got in that current issue, we've got 2 farmers. One on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, one who's been growing and cultivating for about 30 years, and one who's very new to the industry, one was growing medical marijuana and then switched to hemp, and one who's starting with hemp. So it's all of these stories, which are fascinating, how they got into it, how they're growing. And then talking to somebody in Canada who, for the first time, started growing her own plants. She got some seeds and was trying to do 1 or 2 plants on her own, and how she did it, and what she was doing with ladybugs and basil and companion planting, and fascinating stories. And then also too, women who were once in car manufacturing industry and operations and are moving those skills over to cannabis, and how they are now working in the industry and marketing and branding and writing applications, all of these different things that women are doing that make it a lot less scary because they're talking about it.
Right. And I love that you're showing it from the perspective of multiple different starting points. So if you're just trying to grow a couple in your own house or your yard or something, that's one thing. But if you're switching your operation from, dairy farming, for example, which so many people are now because, the price of milk is practically nothing. And, it's kind of like they can't make a living off of it anymore. So these dairy farms are switching over to hemp farms, which I think is great. I love that. And that's the more stories we hear about that, the more people who are on the verge of destitute with their farm now can realize that you can turn this into a big cash crop. It can be the next big American resource. And not only is it great for CBD and the healing properties of the chemicals within the plant, but if you grow a slightly different version of it, you can grow it for, all the other functions, like fabric, concrete.
About that in the magazine, my biggest sort of I'm championing right now is Hempcrete. So every issue, I focus on a house that's been built with hempcrete around the world. There's one in Israel. There's a couple in Australia that are beautiful. And that's really important to me, that the whole plant can be used. As we talked about textiles, we're talking about food and seeds. We're talking about biodiesel fuel. We're talking about getting rid of plastic and alternative to plastic. There's so much opportunity for this plant to really change the way we live. And that's really important to me. And that's part of the Women in Weed.
I love it. I would love when people are thinking about the Green New Deal and what energy sources for the future are going to help fix this planet and save us and whatnot. If there was a Triforce, like a Legend of Zelda Triforce of 3 parts, no matter what those other 2 parts are, hemp needs to be one of that third element. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. Quick, trademark that ASAP.
the Triforce of the Green New Deal. Yeah, but definitely, I think that hemp is one of the things, and everyone who really knows about it, like you, anyone who's researched it, realizes all the different ways we can use this plant, not just for CBD, but like there's so many good ways that the hemp plant can help change us as far as plastics and gas and energy and all of these other things. Like you can make wood out of it, you can make concrete, like you're saying. How many hempcrete companies are there right now? Do you know? Just off the like.
In the United States, there's not very many. There's a project going on. I'm not sure how close they are to being finished. They might be finished by now, but I'm not 100% sure. They're in Bellingham, Washington, and a woman and an actually pretty young contractor has built her house, or I don't think it's her house, it's an addition to her house out of hempcrete. And I think that's the first U.S. major residential construction that's happening with hempcrete. But the house in Israel is been around for a couple of years now and is standing beautifully after, I think, 3 years of being up. And then the places in Australia, they're smaller houses. They're more of a tiny house experience, but they're still quite beautiful and using hempcrete. There definitely are some companies that are starting to in the U.S., but we're not quite there yet. I think we're still actually having to source it from overseas.
Can you explain a little bit what hempcrete is? Because I don't think we've really talked about what it's composed of or anything like that before.
Yeah. So it's the base of the plant, and you have a little lime, a little binder with it, and you mix it. And I mean, this is a very, basic understanding of it, but, it's an alternative to concrete. And it's using the stem and the sort of roots of the plant.
Like all the rough fibrous parts or something?
Yeah, the rough fibrous parts. And then it's an incredible, the strength is really unbelievable. But more importantly, it's able to really, and if you look in the magazine and the book, that you can see the walls are curved. It sculpts really beautifully. And like I said, the strength is there, as well as fire retardant.
Oh, so, right.
Yeah, there's a natural part of the plant too that helps with fire retardants. That's
cool. So basically, in normal concrete, where you would have gravel as the main component, sand. So instead of sand, you're using hemp. Is that where it would fall in, or is it
exactly? You're using the plant, and it's sort of like it's like a hemp lime composite, basically. And the binder is there.
Have you seen this? Have you seen hemp wood? There's a company, I can't remember the name of it, that makes like wooden boards out of hemp, like really compressed, sort of like compressed wood fiber board, but out of hemp. And it looks really good.
I have not seen that, but I have been following. There's two companies, one that's making guitars.
Yeah, I saw that.
Have you seen that? And then ones that are doing golf balls and
really?
Golf tees. That I really think is interesting, and I'm sure they sort of have pressed hemp board to do that.
Very cool. I didn't hear about the golf one, but that would be something we could do on our Cbody segments. We have a sports segment called Cbody with Danny, and Danny's our sports girl who interviews athletes. But definitely that's a cool sports element. We haven't gotten into that, but that
and especially because golf balls and tees, in terms of just decomposing in landfills. I mean, they are there. And so if you can have something that's going to be naturally biodegradable. Like hemp,
the more things that are made now that could be made with a biodegradable substance like hemp should be. Like, what are we doing? These rivers of these oceans of plastic that are just like building up. It's crazy. I wonder if they can make hemp plastic straws. I think that would be that would blow up, because everyone's trying hemp, like made out of hemp plastic, because then they would taste like a real plastic straw, which is you want that feel when you're putting a straw in your mouth, that it has that little bit of give that plastic has. Like, I can't stand these paper straws. It doesn't taste like what it mushes. Yeah.
But I think too, I don't even think you need to make plastic out of it. I think that if you take the base of the the trunk of the plant, hollow it out, and just shape it, I bet you could just have a natural, just a natural straw.
Sort of like bamboo, I guess, like a
exactly,
reed.
Exactly. Exactly. And then what's really nice about that is that you don't, the tastes sort of seep into the plant and they're there. They sort of like an iron skillet, a cast iron skillet.
You're getting a little bit of the residual taste.
Yeah, come on.
See, we just need like you, me, 10 other creatives in a room for, hash it out for a couple days. We'll come up with all the solutions to our hemp future.
Boom, done. I'm in.
Before we wrap up, I do want to talk about you do have some CBD brands that you're making yourself, right? Some brands that you're actually making your own line. Yeah.
So working with these retail partners was great, and we still do. And we've got a traditional retail experience, e-commerce online, Indigo and Haze .com, and it's the tea, it's some of the topicals, vape pen. But there were a couple of things out there that didn't exist that I really wanted that I could never find. And so I'm working with an incredible esthetician and maker in Colorado and we've come up with 3 different products. Well, I shouldn't say 3. We spent a lot of time tinkering, and we definitely put up some products, see how people react to it, and then either keep them up or take them down. But right now we have a daily body lotion, which is really unbelievable. Speaking about terpenes, the scent is just incredible. And that's just something you're in the shower. You come out of the shower and you want your daily body lotion to be CBD rich. It's 200 milligrams, and then that's a great experience. We also have a little mini roll-on that's much more about anxiety relief, based on terpene, based on the smell. So this is a roll-on on the pressure points, inner wrist, back of the neck. You take one smell, you take a deep inhale, and you are, talk about time travel. You are deeply happy, and you forget all your woes. We've got a body scrub, a little hemp sugar cube body scrub, and we've got a big giant tea bag for your bathtub, which is great. So you can get a full hemp soak. You put this giant tea bag in a hot bath, let it just seep for a couple minutes, and then just like go right under. It'll feel great.
You're the sugar cube.
Yeah, particularly for after a workout, it's a great soak. I also have a lot of friends who are runners who do a foot soak with our tea bag, which is great. So we do have our own line, but it's under the sort of larger marketplace called Indigo and Haze, Haze. And
how did you come up with Indigo and Haze?
Oh, that's all my husband. So I'm a big indigo girl. I love the color. You stick that color on anything, I will buy it. My poor husband, I've come home with like pieces of indigo fabric, indigo rub, clothes. I wear jeans all the time. I mean, I'm deeply there.
Sounds like you're an indigo child.
I totally am. And my husband is an incredibly smart, wonderful human being. He's an inventor, bunch of patents on things. He's such a great mind, but he lives his life in a little bit of a haze. Like he is just like way out there. He sort of floats above us all. Like I don't even know where he is or what he's doing half the time because he just lives in this sort of incredible, creative, inventful world. So he combined the two, and we got Indigo and Haze.
Cool. I like it. You do. Yeah, you experience a little indigo here on Earth, and then you go to the haze. You take the haze.
Exactly. It's an evocative name. It is an evocative
At 4:20,
name.
The haze starts. All right. It was so fun talking to you, Elana. Finally, after all this time.
Thank you so much for your patience in making this happen and supporting. I really appreciate it. Not only the business, but the magazine, the book, and just general information and putting it out there. Educate before you medicate.
Yeah, that makes sense. How many pages are in the book? I haven't read it yet, so I want to. Oh, you got a copy right there.
I do.
Hardcover?
It's hardcover. 185 pages.
Nice. It's a lot of info, a lot of content.
That is a lot of bang for your buck, and it's $20. So that's a really good deal.
That is a good deal. Considering magazines are expensive, that's a good price for a hardcover.
Yeah, and like I said, this is everything from CBD to hempcrete, textiles, farming. It's so much. There's so much in here. There's so much good stuff.
So if you're a woman and you're thinking about getting into the hemp industry, this is like book one for your library to try to get
This is your primer.
Yeah.
I mean, this is your primer, and this is going to be your inspiration. This is going to inspire you to be.
And one day maybe you'll get written up and get an article in there, right?
I'm good.
I mean, any other girl, any woman. I'm talking to generic women out there, not you.
Okay.
Women who are thinking like that could be a new goal. It's like the cover of Rolling Stone, just to try to get in the Women in Weed, right?
Totally. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Elana. And we definitely want to have you back. I want to try.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you could send us, maybe we could do an unboxing of your products when we get the studio back.
Great. That would be so great. And, if you want to do a giveaway of one of the books.
Hell yeah, I do.
Let's do it. I've got a copy, and I can send it to whoever wins.
Great. We'll have you sign that, and then we can send it out, or you could send it directly from you after we give it away on the show. Because I don't know if we. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, give it away and tell me who to send it to. I'll sign it and off you. I love it. Yes.
Sounds great. All right. Thank you, Elana.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Hi, Anthony Sullivan here for the CBD Source podcast. You've heard the rest, now listen to the best.
Gang's all here. The CBD Gang. Give the show a call at 1-833-223-4264. That's 1-833-CBD-GANG.
Well, gang, that was a fun episode. So glad to finally speak with Elana. When we were like one or maybe two episodes into this podcast, I went to a lecture she was giving at Foundry 42 in Port Jervis, and that's where I got to hear her backstory. And one thing that she didn't even mention in this whole episode was that she has no sense of smell anymore. Her sense of smell is gone. That's the one thing that really hasn't recovered after that brain injury. If you want to listen to a really interesting episode, someone that I met at her lecture, Jean. I went up to Elana after the lecture and spoke with her, but then I also tracked down Jean, who was just an audience member who had been having multiple seizures every day and started taking CBD a month before she went to this lecture. She went from having chronic seizures down to having no seizures. It's pretty amazing. That's episode 4, if you want to hear that story. Well, gang, we just passed the worldwide million infected mark with this pandemic, so we can only sesh in virtual reality these days. So, I ask you to please join me, Cull Chaney, as my girlfriend Brett reads the comments throughout the show Wednesdays on Facebook and Instagram from 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time to 4:30 p.m. with our big smoke sesh at 4:20, yo. So, gang, stay home as much as possible. Keep those hands clean, keep that 6-foot social distancing, make it 8 feet, make it 12 feet, no one's counting. If you got in early like I did and have masks, great. If you don't have masks, make one out of an old bra, an old bandana, or chop up a hoodie. Stay lifted and keep titrating up. And if you're joining us live, I'll CBD you next Wednesday. If you're strictly audio only, we'll CBD you next Friday.
Give the show a call at 1-833-223-4264. That's 1-833-CBD-GANG.
The CBD Source podcast is written, produced, and hosted by Cull Chaney. Graphic design, photo, and artwork by Ryan Weber, Johnny D, Kevin Bierfelt, Steve, and Cull Chaney. Marketing by Penny Spinazzola. Special thanks to our resident CBD guru, Akash Patel, our CBD Source Vape Lounge expert, Anthony Maltese, our C-Body Fitness instructor, Danny, our personal Cannabidiet CBD chef, Ryan Weber, our CBD News co-host and vocal artist, Tasha Miller, and our CBD Gang subreddit mod, social media maven, and wrap-up girl Cass. That's me. Additional thanks to Caitlin, Liz, Ryan, and Kevin for lending your vocal talent. Want to be a guest on the show? Or do you have a great Weed Man van story? Or a story about your craziest experience with the munchies? Call us at 1-833-CBD-GANG. Again, that's 1-833-223-4264. And leave a message. We like your story, we might play it on the show. Visit us on cbdsourcepodcast.com for all your links to social media, YouTube, and our message board, r/CBDGang on Reddit. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.
Podcast or its related social media pages and interactions are for informational purposes only. The CBD Source podcast does not offer medical advice. Its host, Cole Chaney, is not a medical professional. His experiences with cannabidiol and other cannabinoids are his own and may not affect you the same way. Everybody's endocannabinoid system is different. The statements made regarding CBD products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. The efficacy of these products and the testimonials made have not been confirmed by FDA-approved research. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All information presented here is not meant as a substitute for or alternative to information from healthcare practitioners. Please consult your healthcare professional about potential interactions or other possible complications before using any product. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act requires this notice.
Do you like or want to try quality, third-party tested CBD? Do you live in the New York, Pennsylvania area? We got you covered, gang. We're growing more each month, so check in with cbdsourcecenter.com to find our addresses and new store locations. While you're there, sign up for our mailing list. We're adding new stores across New York and Pennsylvania all the time. We may soon be expanding to a town near you.
Hey gang, want to score free CBD? Sign up for Loyal and Save online or on your phone and use it whenever you shop at CBD Source locations. You'll earn points towards free products and other cool merch. Sign up for free at cbdsourcepodcast.com/loyal. You can download the Loyal and Save app on iTunes or Google Play. That's our loyalty app. Cole helped designed it.
So I recently won a little tincture of Mont Kush CBD, and I had such an amazing experience that I went online and I purchased a full-size bottle of their limited release. I can't stop bragging about it to my friends and my family. It's truly, it truly makes a difference in the way that I felt. I had just completed a conference. I was helping set up and coordinate and manage a conference. So I was on my feet all day, really tired. By the third day of the conference, I felt run down. I felt cranky. My body hurt. And it was a perfect opportunity to try my little tincture of Mont Kush. And so I took half of the little bottle, and within 10 to 15 minutes, I was a new person, completely reset. My mind, the brain fog was gone. My body aches were gone. I felt like I had just woken up from like a rejuvenating nap. It was so amazing that I wrote to Mont Kush on their Instagram page, and I asked when they would release it, and they told me that they had already put up a little limited release. And so I went on and I purchased a full-size bottle. So I'm so thankful for the opportunity to have won one of those prizes, because I found the best CBD that I have tried so far. So thank you to the CBD Source podcast for introducing me to an amazing brand, and I'm super excited about their TV show that is coming out this year. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the CBD Source podcast. This is how we CB do's it.